A little over 10 years ago, I walked away from teaching. It wasn't for the demand on the teachers. It wasn't for any of that. It was something much deeper. And what I want to do today is share with you some of the factors that went into me walking away from the field of education and talk about some of the factors that you might be kind of thinking about if you're nulling over the idea of a career change. I wanted to be a teacher from very early on. I remember when I was in 5th grade, my mom planted a little seed in me and she said, you would be such a great teacher, just like your teacher, Mr. Julian. He's such a nice guy. I could see you doing that, and I think that planted a little seed, and it's great because the field of education, the field of teaching children is awesome. And then when I was in high school and I started to try to think about what I wanted to do, and I really was thinking about something with music and something in the arts, I kind of was saying, all right, well, I probably should be a music teacher because that's a safe job and job security and all that. And granted, I definitely was a high contender without being a safe job and getting that, that pension, all these benefits that come along with that. I still wanted to teach. I love teaching. So I said, I love music. This is great. Perfect. And I really had my head down ever since I was in 9th, 10th, and definitely 11th grade on. And I took it very, very seriously. And to the point where I was looking at my band director and trying to critique her in my own head, how I would do it differently. And then when I went to all county and all state, I look at those band directors and I'd be like, oh, that's, those are my go-tos. Those are my inspiration and all these things. And I was really into it. And I did my undergrad and got my bachelor's of science in music education. I won educator awards and I was really deep in it. I really devoted a lot of my life to it. And then I started teaching. Wow. What a difference. A couple things that I wish if I could go back in time and do over would be my mindset. That's number one. Because when I went into teaching right out of the gate, I had these ideas of what teaching should be like. I had these ideas of what my band should sound like and how they should be run. And I didn't have the real world experience to know okay, that's great. That's an idea to work for. But now what you are one piece of an entirely different puzzle. You're now this little piece of this new puzzle that you have to mold and fit yourself into if you want to make this happen and if you want to be successful in this career. And in the beginning of my career, I had a lot of really interesting experiences. I had some great experiences teaching in different schools. I had some really not so great experiences. And all of this to say was that it really threw me for a loop. I did not know what this was like. I didn't understand that I can't just make everything how I wanted it. I can't make my band programs exactly how I wanted it because there's a lot of other factors that go into this. Not only that, the whole school is not to promote the band. The whole school is the whole school, and you're just, again, a piece of it, and you have to fit into this bigger structure. So at this point in my life, I really had to take a step back because I never did. For the longest time, I had my head down, and I was so committed to being a great teacher that I had to ask myself, is this what I want? Is this what it's like? Will it be different? Will it be the same everywhere I go? What am I going to do? And it took a really long and hard look at my time in my life. I was 20, something like that. 20. I was a young man. And I also really was still invested in music. And I wanted to kind of see where this could take me. And at that moment, I didn't have any type of real full-time job or anything. So I said to myself, what's my next step? And long, short story, I'm not going to, go into the details, but this ultimately ended up with me doing my master's work at the Royal Liège Conservatory in Belgium. So I left everything I knew, left all my people, my girlfriend for years at the time, and I went off and I lived in Belgium to pursue my musical abilities and see how far of a musician I can take it. And then I came back and I needed a way to make money right away because developing my music career was going to be a long game. So what am I going to do? So I started looking for teaching jobs. And granted, I knew this was probably just a step along this bigger plan. I had this whole roadmap of, teaching at the college level and maybe getting a spot in the military band or whatever. And I had this job come across my table where it was this kind of part-time little job where we were kind of reinstating the elementary band program. It was knocked out, the budget collapsed, and they literally let go of every single elementary band and orchestra teacher. It was a mess. And now, years later, we were going to rebuild it. So it was this little after-school program, I think 45 minutes after school, this little teeny little kind of showcase concert. It was really nothing, but it was just something in the right direction, and I was part of this reinstatement team. So I do this for a little while, and I begin to get comfortable again. And I also start subbing in the district because why not? And then I become a permanent sub. And then all of a sudden, there was a full-time job that was open in this district. And I will tell you, this was definitely like a district that I probably didn't want to see myself full-time and long-term. Like I didn't see myself retiring from this district, but I had another decision to make. And this was really interesting because there was this moment where I was in this district and I was subbing, and I was also, again, really invested in my music career. But with that came along me learning about business, because if I was going to become a musician, I had to treat this musical career as a business. That's really what it was. So I very slowly was introduced to the world of entrepreneurship and business, and I started reading books. I started, I got into the Tony Robbins world and all that, and then I read The 4-Hour Workweek. Now, if you haven't read this book, this is not as cheesy as the title may seem. It's actually a fascinating book on business practices, delegation, organization, all these different things. But it also kind of showed me something. And it showed me that anything and everything was possible. If I wanted to be a musician, but then make some type of drop shipping website around my musical abilities, maybe sell an online training program or something, all of these possibilities came out, and it was just unreal. I felt so powerful and so capable, and it was like a door was opened and I never even knew this door existed. So I had to make a decision in this moment. Do I go through this process and try to get this full-time job as a teacher, or do I really pursue this new part of my life that I was so passionate about? So obviously, the direction I took. And this is really important to share because I didn't know what the path was going to be. I had no idea. And I didn't know how long it was going to take either. And if you told me at that time that I was going to be a youth speaker, a youth motivational speaker, and you were going to somehow make that part of your musical career, I'd be like, dude, what? That's so far out of what I'm planning. I would be a little surprised / worried. So my life trajectory is what really made me make this decision to leave teaching and pursue a business. Now, I want to break this down in a couple of things so you understand more so than this is just not my life and my vision. There is more elements that go into this, and maybe these are the elements that you're facing. So number one, the pay. I'm from New York, Long Island, New York, and the pay for teachers in New York is actually quite good. So I was lucky there. And that was one of the factors that was actually driving me to stay in the career. Teacher autonomy. This was a big one. And this was a complete con for me. Again, I walked into this on one completely end of the spectrum saying, thinking to myself, I can do whatever I want. This is going to be my program. I'm going to perform these pieces and I'm going to do all these things. And it was like literally the exact opposite. It was like, you're going to do what I tell you to jump and you're going to dance when I say to dance. And I was like, it was so restrictive in what I was allowed to do, what I was allowed to teach. And that was not just one district. That was a couple of different districts. And I learned that, it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's the system, because what an administrator is telling you in saying, you're only allowed to do this, you got to be careful. Don't say that. Don't do this. They're actually trying to say, hey, listen, I've got a boss to report to, right? And that boss, whether it be the AP or the principal, has another boss to report to, and that's the superintendent. And guess what? That superintendent has a boss, and that's called the Board of Education and the taxpayers. Okay, so we've got this whole big system, and that is one of the biggest things and biggest challenges for teachers now is the lack of autonomy, the lack of to be able to do and say what you need to do to be able to actually teach what you need to teach. On top of that, there's the state requirements, there's state testing, there's state initiatives, whatever it may be, that is really restricting you because you want to do certain lesson plans, but you're not going to have enough time to do that. So ultimately, there is so much coming down on you from administration, from the state, and then from the parents too. Because if you have an issue with a parent or a group of parents or whatever, it is very difficult to get past that. And I was lucky enough to not have really too many issues with parents at all, which is great. But I've seen other people really, really struggle. So if you are dealing with a lack of autonomy from, like I said, from your administrators, from the state, and from parents, totally get it. Student behavior. This is a big one. And my experiences in and out of the classroom was pretty middle of the road. And I think, again, when you first start out in the career, and if you happen to be young, it is very important that you are teaching younger students. And I was lucky enough to be mostly in elementary buildings at that point because you need that age difference, obviously. But student behavior, yes, has trended backwards a bit. And obviously, COVID did a big number in that. And we are still, in my opinion, 6 years later, still trying to kind of come back from that a little bit, set expectations, set a foundation of what it means to come to this building, what it means to be a student, and what it means for parents to support that student and support the school initiatives. But I will tell you this. Every district is different. So please don't let student behavior be a deciding factor. You need to at least teach in 3 or 4 or even 5 different districts to really get an understanding of, is this just kids these days? Is this an anomaly in this district or that district? But, oh, you know what? In this building, this was run very different. I like this. And I had those experiences too. Another factor you got to think about is the increasing demands of what it means to be a teacher, because back in the day, whatever that day that was, let's say the 80s, when my uncle was a science teacher, a middle school science teacher, he told me things like, the principal didn't come into my classroom to observe me unannounced. No. They tell me when they're going to do whatever they need to do. This is my classroom. And that's how it was. They had so much control of what went on in their classroom. And maybe that's not such a good thing, but maybe we are missing some of that. Another factor to think about is the possibilities now. Because when I graduated high school in 2005, the landscape of social media and just media in general really wasn't as anywhere near as broad as it is 20 years ago. It wasn't as in your face, and the possibilities of what you can do as a career weren't there. So even if you are somewhat young in your career and you're thinking about changing, you have so many possibilities. I mean, man, you can easily start little side businesses and see where it goes. There's so many different ways to create a career for yourself on the internet, online, building communities, doing all these things. And you could even still do it in the realm of education. But either way, back in my day, it really wasn't so much. And plus, we were still stuck in that, hey, you got to go to college to get the career and the degree so you can get the XYZ because you need XYZ. So I think there is a lot of possibilities that are now in your face that wasn't so in mine. So you may be dealing with options that you had. And again, this was later for me. It was by 2015 that I decided to, okay, there's a lot more going on here. That was 10 years later. So again, so much has happened in those 10 years. And now even another 10 years on top of that, there's even more possibilities. And the last thing I think you really need to think through is the energy. Teaching is an incredibly unique job. We are in this little niche of people. It's this little group, it's this club that if you're not in the club, you don't really get it. And sometimes that's a bad thing, because all my teacher friends, they're like, I had such a hard day. And my wife, who was for years and still in the healthcare system, but for years was a pediatric ICU nurse, pediatric intensive care. She was like, tell me about your tough day. Oh, you got done at 3:30? Okay. Yeah. Oh, did you have dying kids with cancer? Oh, no. Okay. Like they couldn't compete, So she's like, they don't get it. And I understand. But at the same time, it's very unique because, again, you're not reacting. You're not in healthcare. You're not EMS, but you are building, you're crafting, you're molding these future human beings, these future adults. And that is so insanely taxing. Not only is it emotionally, mentally taxing, especially when you're dealing with student behavior and lack of support and all these things, but it is also physically demanding. I mean, high schools, they start at like 7:15 in the morning. You got to be there at 6:45. That means you got to wake up no later than like 5:30, and that's pushing. I mean, that is a very early sleep schedule. That's really going against most people's circadian rhythm, and they're all thrown off. Yeah, they get out at 3:30, but that doesn't mean that their work is done. You know this, I know this, but most people don't. So the amount of hours and the amount of things that you're doing physically, and especially if you're in any type of other thing, like, if you're a music teacher, or an athletic director, anything like that, that you've got to do all these extra stuff and extracurricular on top of it, it's just insane. But again, at the end of the day, it is mentally taxing. It is exhausting. It is emotionally draining. And that sometimes is way harder than the physical stuff, but combine them together, you are done. So at the end of the day, if you are not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally, you're not going to make it. And of course, you're going to be looking for other career options. So with that being said, I want you to really think through. I want you to at least try to teach in a few different districts before you make this decision. Because for me, I had a good amount of experience. Yes, it was truncated in 3, 4, 5 years or whatever it is. But I've taught in so many different buildings. I've had so many different experiences, and I knew that these other things were calling me. And at the same time, I said, well, I never want to really step away from kids. I love teaching, and that's kind of why I do what I do. I'm a youth speaker. I speak in high schools and middle schools. I interact with those students all the time because I love, in a way, still teaching. Again, if I do this anymore, my fingers will break off. Either way, that is it. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you were able to get some value out of this and really think through and be methodical about what your next steps are going to be. And if you are continuing the next school year in your district and you are looking for, say, a speaker to come in and really instill some type of passion and motivation, if you will, then definitely reach out to me. You'll see a link in the description to book a call, and I'll kind of talk with you about how I do just that. And if you like today's video, then you might also like this one right over here.